Hi there, thanks so much for opting in. This video is designed to help you understand what proper movement really is, what proper alignment really is. Because if we're not working with intention or with purpose, or if we're coming from the wrong alignment, we can actually do more harm than good in our bodies. And when we work with intention, when we work with the right alignment, well, that's when you see results faster and your body feels more fluid, more youthful, and more energized, and quite frankly, pain-free. And that's what I want for you. My name's Gretchen McCarthy. I've been a fitness instructor and Pilates instructor for the past 20 years. And I like to think of myself as that friendly little voice in my clients' ears, constantly reminding them to engage their abs, elongate their spine, pull their shoulders down, balance those feet, everything. You're gonna start to hear my voice in everything that you do, because I like to think of my workouts more as exercise of the mind to really hone our skills in that mind-body connection so that we can take it to our everyday lives, so we can take it into our everyday movement and to our other workouts so they become more efficient and that we see results faster. So I hope that you love this video series. I hope that you learn new things, and let's get started. To start up our video series, we're going to talk about the pelvis. So the pelvis is the powerhouse of our body. It's the center of our body, right above our legs and below our torso. So it's really, really important to have proper pelvic placement before you initiate any movement. Because if your pelvis is out of alignment, well, that's when you're going to feel hip pain or leg pain, shoulder pain, neck pain. Really, it can be the source of a lot of injury in your body. So we really want to make sure that we start with proper alignment. So what does that mean? Well, in our pelvis, we have a few important bones. We have our hip bones, and I'm gonna speak in simple terms so that we can understand. You have your hip bones and your pubic bone, okay? And they make a triangle. You can also think about it as a clock, okay? Right at your navel is 12 o'clock. Your pubic bone is 6 o'clock, and then you have the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock as your two hip bones. And anytime I talk about stuff in the front of our bodies, we also have it in the back of our body. You have your two hip bones here, also are here, as well as your tailbone, and your tailbone is sort of right in back of your pubic bone. Okay, so when I talk about the front of the body, also know that it happens in the back of the body. Okay, so if we think about it in clock terms, where we have that 12, 6, 3, and 9, okay, so we have our clock facing forward. Now, if I were to turn, so you can see this, the 12 and the 6 are really right on top of each other in that neutral pelvis. All right, so in this position, it's very easy for me to stack the shoulders on the hips and on the heels. Everything's stacked once my pelvis is stacked, okay? If I were to move my pelvis so that the 6 o'clock went in front of the 12 o'clock, well, now I'm in what's called a posterior tilt, and I am exaggerating it, but I do see a lot of people in a posterior tilt. This is as if I were lying down, my back is jamming into the mat. My glutes are squeezed, so they're already coming in an engaged position, and then my hamstrings are short and tight, and my hip flexors are long and probably weak. And it's really hard to elongate the spine in this position. It's also very difficult for me to get my feet perfectly balanced. All right, so if I were to do the opposite position, where the 6 o'clock is behind the 12 o'clock, well, now I'm in an anterior tilt, if you can see that, okay? My back is extended. My hamstrings are elongated, probably weak. My hip flexors are tight and shortened. Okay, and quite frankly, it's very hard to engage my belly in this position, and I have a lot of strain in my back. If I were to initiate exercise from this position, let's say I were to lift up here, well, oh my gosh, it's a lot of pain in my low back, okay? Usually the way to alleviate low back pain many times is just find your neutral pelvis first and then work from there. Initiate, really be intentional about the start of your exercise. That's the most important. So if I start correctly, well, the movement in my body can really much work correctly. If I were to go into a roll down here, okay, so I'm trying to get my sit bones right on top of my heels, all right? Now, you'll hear a lot in Pilates and yoga and, mindful movement is rolling up, stacking up the spine. Well, if we think in terms of pelvis, if I think about just stacking my pelvis first, so that's where my mind goes, just stack the pelvis, get that in place, well, automatically the rest of my body goes into place as well, okay? So let's think about this in a lying down position, okay? So if I think about this while I'm lying down on my back, a lot of Pilates exercises come from lying down on your back. Well, get that clock perfectly upright towards the ceiling. Get the 12 and the 6 lined up especially, and then your 2 hip bones, the 9 and the 3 as well. Okay, so with that, you have a little space in your low back on the mat. All right, so get that clock perfectly flat. And then I like to think of this, like to really engage the abdominals, because if you think about it, you know, the pelvis is attached to your leg muscles. So you got your femurs here. So a nice place of rotation at the leg and the pelvis is right in that hip area, okay? So that's an important part. And then your pelvis is also attached to your low back, okay? So we need to really stabilize the pelvis when it's on the ground because there's a lot of these moving parts on it, okay? So clock is facing upward. Imagine, so really put this in your brain, okay? Taking your 2 hip bones, the bony parts, and trying to pull them in your mind, imagine it, trying to pull the 2 bones towards each other, okay? So when I pull the 2 bones towards each other in my mind, you can't really do it, but feel what that does to your muscles that are attached to those bones, okay? So if I try to do that, well, what happens is my low belly engages. It's sort of like a corset just wraps in tight, okay? So if you keep that feeling of the hip bones pulling into each other, your clock staying perfectly still, not tilting, especially in this position, there's a tendency to tilt the pubic bone, so that's 6 o'clock above the 12 o'clock, and so you then sort of really lost your neutral alignment there. So you really want to try to keep those 3 points perfectly, you know, flat, okay? So if I were to come up with the head, neck, and shoulders, I still want to keep that flat. Let's take our hands behind our head just to support our head here. All right, so I'm pulling my hip bones towards each other. I am keeping my pelvis perfectly flat. I'm not tilting it. And then I try to lift my chest as high as I can go without tilting the pelvis towards me. So my body will stop at a certain point. It won't be able to go up any further because to get up further, you have to have a tilt because then the pelvis goes and stacks, okay? So I'm gonna roll my pelvis back again, get it flat, okay? And now let's go through the motion. I'm gonna take my hands behind the head. Keep it flat, lift up to the highest point that you can go, and I like to call that your sticky point because you can't go up further. If you go up further, what happens? Well, then you sort of have to tilt a little bit of the pelvis to come up because you need movement in the pelvis as you're moving through the body. That's just mindful movement, that's proper movement. But again, we're talking about initiating the exercise, starting from the proper place, all right? So to start a perfect sort of ab prep, all right, lifting the head, neck, and the shoulders, keep the neutral pelvis, pull those ab muscles in, and try to lift up. Stay there and just give little pulses. And be very mindful of your abdominal muscles pulling the chest up, but those low abdominal muscles keeping the pelvis still. Okay? So you have a band of abdominal muscles that are attached to the ribs and pull down to the hips, all right, to the pelvis. So these are your moving muscles. So those muscles pull the ribs to the hip bones, to the pelvis. That's what we're talking about today, all right? But then you have these abdominal muscles that wrap in like a corset, and those abdominal muscles are keeping the pelvis still, all right? So those low ab muscles are pulling the pelvis still. So keep that still, pull those hip bones towards each other, and then lift the upper body. Give me pulses, 10, 9, 8. Be very mindful. Are you keeping the pelvis still? That's what we're talking about here. All right, and then use the ab muscles to pull towards that still pelvis. And then lower it down and release. Good. All right, so let's talk about the pelvis now while we're on our stomach. All right, so I've got my clock facing forward. My 12 o'clock and my 6 o'clock especially are down on the mat. All right, and I'm going to get my feet up just about as wide as my pelvis. Okay, hands by my shoulders. So right now, I'm going to focus on getting the pubic bone and the hip bones sort of making a connection with the floor. Okay, I'm not digging in too deep where like everything's super squeezed before I move. So if we're talking about initiating our movement, okay, the way that we initiate our movement is what's most important, right? So let's get in the right start position. Really feel those 3 points, the hips and the pubic bone, flat, in line with each other, and making a connection with the floor. Okay, so in this position, if I start to lift from the head first, lift from the head, lift from the head, lift from the head, but keep like those still points, well, it's allowing movement to happen in my spine, okay? If I were to go into that posterior tilt I talked about before, so if I push my pubic bone in further than my hip bones, okay? So if that 6 o'clock is digging deep into the floor and my 12 o'clock is sort of lifting off the floor, if I were to come up, I sear right into my low back. There's no proper movement allowing to happen, especially at that femur, okay? And the same is true as if I start in extension, well then right there, it goes right into my low back. There's no articulation whatsoever coming up, all right? So really keeping that neutral pelvis to start with the initiation of the movement, okay? That's really what it's all about. I sit back and stretch here just to kind of let go and release, okay? So you can see how important the pelvis is in our body. It is the center part of all of our movement, okay? And then if we can get our pelvis in placement, in proper placement, well then our movement becomes more efficient. We really do feel like we're moving more fluidly with less pain, okay? So play with it a little bit this week. You know, especially when you're walking or when you're standing, because we have a tendency to sit from hip to hip. So that's another way of thinking about it. You know, your 3 o'clock and your 9 o'clock, if they're tilting, right? That means the pelvis is tilting. Well, you're placing too much weight on one leg or the other, or something in your body is straining, okay? So you really want to focus. And I didn't go into the tilting because I just wanted to really focus on those 2 posterior and anterior tilts. But if you really focus on standing still and balanced on both feet equal, keeping your pelvis really neutral, and then work and move from there, you will feel a difference in the way that your body moves. And then you'll be initiating your exercises more efficiently. So let's say, you know, you work out on a regular basis. Well, do this with your strength training. Use it in your cardio classes or when you're running. Really focus on the stacking of the pelvis properly, okay? So I hope this was helpful for you. I look forward to seeing you in the next video where we talk about the next body part. Thanks so much. Take care. Have a great day.